Hey, everybody, it's Reggie with Lawyer Interviews. And today we're talking with Leah, who is an attorney out of Amarillo, Texas. Hi, Leah.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
Nice to have you. And you're one of our first female criminal defense attorneys. So I'm very excited to have you on here and to talk a little bit more about what that's like being a female in, the defense side, but also criminal defense and in federal and state. And to hear a little bit about your experiences. And then also, I know we just chatted briefly, you are very involved in cannabis law and it sounds like some lobbying or educating prosecutors. And so I'd love to know more about cannabis and the status of Texas.
Oh, the status in Texas is very convoluted, like we discussed briefly. So we don't have legalization per se. In 2019, we did legalize the federal farm bill. It legalized hemp and THC products of 0.3% or less. So like your CBDs, your care stuff. We extended our medical cannabis care a little bit as well, but we are still in a legal state. And moreover, we have any derivative of marijuana. So your wax, your vape pens, sodas, edibles, those are felonies, no matter how much you have.
Wow, complete felony, just auto
Yeah.
felony. Wow.
And so like your soda, because of the additive laws put in place for crack cocaine in the 70s, it's a first-degree felony.
Wow, I didn't even think of that. You think having a soda with a little bit of THC in it, and you're thinking maybe a misdemeanor, and you're talking a full-on felony. Like that is interesting, very interesting. So have you had clients then charged with first-degree felonies over possession?
Absolutely, all the time. And it's especially prevalent in our younger communities because our kids will run over to Colorado and go skiing for the weekend. They'll bring back a brownie thinking, oh, this is the equivalent of a joint.
Right.
And then they get hit with a first-degree felony. And
oh my God, that's insane. Yeah. So are you involved at all with any of like lobbyist groups or, groups helping educate the legislature about, grams? I guess I'm just kind of confused why they take that the same as, treating it like crack cocaine laws.
We are not directly affiliated with anybody. My boss is a member of NORML, and one of his best friends, Daniel Mailer, we use as our expert witness because he went through the cannabis program in North Carolina that gave him a master's in cannabis pharmacology. So we have been called out and we've helped with some things. We've had him testify in several federal courts, but we're not directly affiliated with anybody at this time.
Gotcha. Okay. Very cool. Well, how do you explain to a client too that's thinking, oh, I got charged with possession of, you're thinking a little bit of pot, marijuana, whatever, something infused with THC, and all of a sudden now they're facing a felony charge. What is that like for a client?
It's horrifying most of the time. What I can say is that we've had a lot of the DAs in our area. We're in a small rural area, so we have a ton of counties that we service. And I will say that our DAs have been really open. We've been able to explain to them that when the state legalized the federal farm bill, they didn't realize that they don't have the testing capability to test to that specificity. They can't say something is 0.3% THC or higher. And so we've been battling it from that standpoint mostly. A lot of our DAs have decriminalized in effect, not officially, but they'll give a drug paraphernalia or something because they understand that right now they can't prove their case.
Right.
And we do have some counties trying to farm out to private labs, especially Armstrong labs, but it is not very cost efficient. And right. Texas thrives on our economy, and marijuana has been a big moneymaker for them, which I think is part of the reason we haven't legalized. Right. So I think that once they start to see them having a huge cut in their marijuana profits, that maybe we can trend towards legalization. That's the hope anyway.
Absolutely. And I wonder too, have you seen a lot of, if the state can't prove the case, have you seen a lot more dropping of charges or settling out or plead down? What have you noticed in trends that way?
It depends on the DA in the county. Some of them are dismissing. Some of them are offering just killer deals where they'll 1245 it, which is where we reduce it to a misdemeanor in Texas, and then they defer it as well. And then when we get to that place, it comes down to the client. Is this somebody who really wants to fight the power and maybe have to fight appeals for years? Or do they want to say like, hey, I know I can do a deferred probation and I would like to just get this off my record and move on with my life. And so when it gets to that point, obviously we want to fight everybody because look at what we do for a living, but
Right.
we have to be really cognizant of what our clients need, because there's anxiety levels with especially first degree felonies. We
Yeah.
have clients that become overwhelmed, and we need to get them in a program to get it off their record and let them move on.
Exactly. I mean, I'm just kind of curious in Texas, how hard is it to remove a felony, like especially when you're talking about first degree drug possession, charge? It's similar to like possessing crack. How hard is that to get off your record?
As long as we plea it correctly when we enter into the plea bargain, then we can expunge their records after 6 months if it's a diversion, or we can seal their records like you would a juvenile record. Because when it's dismissed with deferred, it's shows dismissed, but the charge remains there. So then we can seal the charge as well. So
kind of like a plea in abeyance kind of thing, where it's there if they don't complete the necessary programs and sober testing and all that, I'm sure goes into it. But what about people with maybe prior charges? I mean, does this just compound their life, unfortunately, in the system?
We do have to take special care if they have priors. Sometimes the DAs are not as willing to work with us if they're priors, or if we have marijuana cases where they can't necessarily prove it's marijuana, but they know that they had like 50 to 2,000 pounds, that range.
Right.
They're not going to work with us as well. But again, it depends on the DA. It's just a matter of playing the game and playing the chess game instead of just letting things happen.
Of course. Well, and criminal law too is such, I did a little bit of, I worked for a public defender's office as a student certified attorney, and I loved it. I thought that was the most fun I probably have ever had. And I loved it. And, meeting with clients who are going through some really hard times in their lives. How do you prepare for that mentally when you're about to meet with a client who's going through some hard stuff?
The thing that I have found works best for me is to remember that my clients are people first and foremost. They are not a charge on a piece of paper. They are not this thing that they're accused of. They are a person with experiences. When we get people that have come through with large weight, there's a reason that they're muling drugs. And then we'll get veterans who have PTSD and it's their medicine, or people with broken backs. I've seen a lot of things. And a lot of times, if you can relay that to a DA or even a jury, we've gone to trial and where we've done a purely sentencing trial, because in the state of Texas, the jury can sentence. So we'll go in and be guilty at the onset, but then go directly into a sentencing trial, because when you can make the jury see your client as a person, it's a lot harder to send a person to prison than it is to send a charge to prison.
Right. And seeing that human behind the charge and saying, a lot of these, at least in my experience, when I was doing public defense work, a lot of these individuals come from households or just generations of either poverty or substance abuse or mental abuse, physical abuse, and they need help. Not, incarceration is not the answer. It's rehabilitation that's needed. And I'm wondering, kind of, you guys, when you're talking to a jury, I guess, about sentencing, you bring that up, I'm sure. How does that play in to when you're talking to a jury or a judge about sentencing?
I think that our main focus is always rehabilitation. There's no point, in my opinion, in putting a person in prison if we're not going to treat the underlying issues.
Right.
And that's, I will say, for the federal system, I prefer the federal system in that sense, because they have a lot more programs than our state systems. I will say for our local judges, at least, they're pretty empathetic. If we can show them a true issue, it's not just, hey, my client wants to be a gangster or, whatever. It's no, this person has an underlying addiction that's never been treated, that's been brought on by years of mental abuse or whatever the situation is. Can we get them in rehab? Can we get them in therapy? Can we get them in some other treatment program before we try prison, and give them at least the opportunity to show the ability to change before we just throw them away?
Exactly. I love that too. I like that's kind of what the whole justice system was supposed to be set up to do. And it obviously has failed for a long time on the rehabilitation side, at least in my opinion. Well, I'd love to also talk about your Instagram. I have been fangirling over it for several days. It is awesome. You're such a badass. Like, I love you. Big fan over here. So I love that you're like, this tatted badass woman lawyer, like out there showing it. Like, how has your Instagram come across to like either clients or other professionals out there? Have you had any like mixed reviews, or has it been positive?
I think that I have just kind of created a I don't care attitude.
Yeah.
And so I've become kind of the accepted black sheep. Like I post things that probably other people aren't comfortable with, like bikini pictures and shoots that I've done before. And the attitude is kind of just like, oh, that's Leah. It's just, I've been very open with who I am from the get. I never really edited myself professionally. My boss is fully tattooed. I think that's honestly part of the reason he hired me. It makes clients more comfortable for sure.
Right.
So I think when you're always authentic, or at least trying to be authentic, I don't think everybody's always authentic, but when you are authentic and you stick to who you are, then people are either going to accept you or they're not.
Right.
And for me, if people don't accept me, it's like, sorry about you. I mean, I have had a couple of, usually it's the parents of clients that'll walk in and they don't like it. And okay.
And you just go, what is my ink, or how does it, the way I appear, have to do with my competency? It doesn't, right? And it doesn't have to do with my professionalism. And I've got tattoos too, and it's the same thing. It's like, what does that have to do with the level of skill I'm bringing into that courtroom? Not a damn thing.
And for the most part, the responses that I receive are really positive. It may be different if I were in a different environment like corporate law. I could totally understand it. But for my clients, I've had multiple clients say, your tattoos put me at ease because I don't feel like I'm being judged by you. Like you're just a person.
Right.
And that's exactly what it is.
And I'm sure for a lot of people too, I remember, getting this comment, well, like, you have no idea what it's like in my life. And sometimes sharing those experiences with clients, I didn't come from like, this white collar, amazing family. Like I had family issues growing up. I had lots of other fun issues, and kind of relating to them. All of a sudden it's like they get them to open up and they're a little more comfortable sharing their stories. And so the fact that they can look at your tattoos and go like, you made me comfortable right away, probably gets those barriers down pretty fast, I'm sure.
Well, and I think I tend to lean on it a little bit in jury selection. If I have a heavily tattooed client, I'll just push my sleeves up occasionally, let the jury see like, hey, this doesn't mean anything about me, and it doesn't mean anything about the person sitting in this chair.
Exactly. And in contrast, like it's beautiful artwork. It's an expression. It usually has some symbolization to the person. So, I think it's great. I love it. And I love that you're out there unapologetically too, because I've seen a few other attorneys out there, like on either like TikTok or Instagram, showing themselves, their personal lives and their, let's go attitude. And I think it's great. It's refreshing. It makes law less stuffy. And I love that.
Yeah. And that's a challenge in itself. So
yeah. How is dealing sometimes with prosecutors or anything? Have you ever had any like weird circumstances because they're like, okay, you've got tattoos yourself, or have you ever felt that?
I think that we have a really good camaraderie around here, at least in the direct area that I'm in Amarillo. I won't say necessarily that the prosecutors are my best friends, but we have a great working relationship. They're all very professional. There are a few that I don't necessarily get along with, but it's usually never because of appearance. It's just personality differences, and we just don't mesh, and that's okay too.
Of course.
As long as they don't take it out on my clients, I don't care. You don't have to like me.
Right, exactly. I'm like, I don't care if you don't like me. It's like, I care if the jury likes my client and the judge. Exactly. Well, I would love to know too, when did you realize for you that criminal law was your jam? Like, when did that click for you?
I have always wanted to be an attorney. I wrote an essay about it in the 4th grade. I think since my dad used to tell me I could argue with a fence post. And so I think it was this idea. And then when I was in high school, a good friend of mine was involved in a case that made national news. And it literally tore his whole family apart. And it just became, I felt he was the defendant, but I felt so protective of him. And I realized he needed representation, and he got amazing representation. But I wanted to be that for people. I wanted to be somebody's support when nobody else has ever supported them, which is often what I see in my clients.
Right. Right. Everyone's given up on them. They feel like they don't have anybody. And, people, I'm sure you see this in families too. They take a charge and go, oh, guilt. It's like, no, not guilt, like due process. You got to go through this. And, I can't imagine that kind of feeling of isolation for an individual. So I bet it's great being able to represent those people and make them feel like they've got someone behind them.
And it does make a difference. And you're not going to connect with every client on that level, but even the few that you can, I mean, you may not change the world, but you'll change their world. And sometimes it's the best we can do.
Absolutely. All right. If you weren't practicing criminal defense, what area of law would you be practicing?
I don't know.
You've never thought about it. You're like, this is it.
Oh, and I've helped. My husband is a contractor, and so I've looked over contracts for him, and I hate it.
Hate it.
I'm sorry for the people that do it. Good for you. I commend you. But
it's boring. Like that's what I mean, that's why I do business for. Yeah. I mean, I don't have any of the good, sexy stories like you all do. Like I sit at a table with other attorneys and it's like, we don't want to hear from you. Like you got nothing fun to say.
I mean, and I could see how it could be fun to nitpick each word and get into the definition of things. I could see how that would be fun. And I try to approach it from that situation, that angle when I am in those situations, but it's not fun.
It's not. It's not. It's not. Yeah. Oh, well, I'd love to ask a couple other questions too about when you're going to trial. How is voir dire for you, jury selection? I mean, how do you, in your opinion, pick out jurors who you believe are going to be either non-biased or sympathetic to your clients? Do you have any strategies there?
Voir dire is my favorite part of trial work.
Really? Never heard anyone say that. Okay, tell me why.
Because it's kind of a psychological exercise. If you can find a way to connect with a juror, I think that humans as people and our nature is to be pack animals. Mm-hmm. So if you can connect with the jury, you become a part of their pack and they want to protect you and they want to take care of your client. Right. So voir dire for me is not giving them definitions of what reasonable doubt is and meeting the elements. I want to go immediately into whatever issues are in the case and really talk to jurors about those issues. Mm-hmm. And you can start to select people that you can see are not necessarily even on your side, but are at least open-minded. Right. And then you can kind of break down those defenses and become part of their team. And I think that that's the way you get the best results. Very cool. And do you do that through questioning? Do you just watch and analyze their body language? I mean, how do you determine that? Like for example, we did a case several years ago where we did a sentencing trial and our client was trying to make money essentially. And he had told us a story about his daughter and we just connected with his daughter. So what I did in jury selection is I picked a random juror. I got really lucky with him. And I said, do you have children? Yes, whatever. And I said, I want you to describe to me in detail the first time you ever held your daughter. Interesting. What would you do for that little girl? And I had this tough West Texas cowboy crying during jury selection. And the rest of the jurors or the panel they're crying. Yeah. And then in the sentencing, I actually, as an exhibit, gave out pictures of his daughter. And I asked my client, I said, what does your daughter tell you when she's hungry? And he says, she tells me that her spine's eating her belly button. Oh. And you could have heard him drop. Yeah. And that whole jury was in their minds of what was it like for my child? What links would I go to for my child? Mm-hmm. Instead of my client as a person. Right. And that's a human element. I love that. And that you're able to connect the jurors to that too. I love that. I've never heard anyone refer to it as that pack mentality, surround ourselves with people we would protect. But I think that's a very cool way to think about jurors. I did a serious science seminar where we did some work with the Lawyers Trial College, mm-hmm. And they did focus groups, and they really talked about pack mentality and how you have to make yourself part of the team, mm-hmm. Because people want to protect the underdog. We want to protect people that we think are being done wrong. Right. And if suddenly it's your client and not the state,
Mhm.
You're sitting pretty.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as we have seen in recent years, and I'd love to get your take on this too, law enforcement also has historically gotten a lot of the benefit of the doubt in a lot of situations. Like, we trust them. It's the police. It's the people who are there to protect us. But we, in recent years, because of body cams and audio or people filming on cell phones, that opinion has started to maybe change and expose way huge underlying issues. How has that impacted the practice of criminal law, in your opinion, as far as like the trust level of the government?
I think it has put us on a more even playing field finally. You still have to select your jury with care. I mean, our Amarillo is divided by 2 counties, and we have one county that is predominantly the more affluent county. It's going to be predominantly white.
Mhm.
And then we have another county that is more minorities. It has a higher level of poverty. And so even just knowing what your demographic is in your area makes a difference, because I know that when I go to one county versus the other, there's going to be some distrust of the police in this one versus this one. You really have to watch how you talk about the police, because they're still going to generally be on that side because they just don't have the same experiences.
Right.
Um, And so a lot of jury selection is simply knowing your demographic. Wherever you're going, know what the feel of the area is. But I do think that it's at least brought it to people's attention, even the attention of people who have not experienced those issues personally. And I think that that has given us a little bit of a leg up finally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think transparency helps, take situations that are maybe under the covers and, not brought to light, finally exposed, and where real change can happen. So I'm hopeful that, positive change keeps happening. And, because there's been a lot of people that have been incarcerated over issues that were not correct, or, bad evidence, or suppression of evidence, or the chain of evidence, or just bogus charges, and those people spend lives in prison, and it's awful. So I am glad to see that too.
It's about time.
Yeah,
It's been over.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Leah, it's been so good talking to you, and thank you for spending your morning with us. I'd love to let everyone know, if you don't mind throwing up your social handles so that we can have everyone follow you, and we'll throw up the words, but if you'll just let us know, that'd be great.
My Instagram is Leah2122. And then we also have our law firm page is tisdelllaw.com. And then you can probably find me on Facebook under Leah Housler-Thornton. And I do a free legal advice page with Leah. It's just a small group of people, but it's open to whoever wants to join it, where I just put in fun facts or tips or advice that people can ask questions as well, and just kind of to create more awareness.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much again. And thank you everybody for watching Lawyer Interviews. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.